In this movie, we're going to build Java setup and launch our first project, start to finish. All right, let's make this happen. First, I'm going to download and install Java. I'm going to search for Java download. The web page is pretty smart and it auto-detects my operating system. I'm going to click on self-explanatory buttons and install software to a default location. While the software is installing, let's make sure you succeed in the long run. If you had never dealt with professional software setups, it could be a little bit confusing and even intimidating at first. That's because you don't have a base. Not to worry, we're going to build one in. This is, by the way, the investment in the future, because chances are you're going to have to go through this over and over and over again, because the same principle applies to Java, Android, web development, and so many other things. So, let's get started. By now you're used to consumer-oriented software. To install it, well, you only need one file, typically. This file is going to take care of business. Your input is going to be limited to just a few parameters. It's going to unpack itself, interact with the operating system, and then everything is going to be good to go. You can think of this approach as buying a laptop. Most of the stuff has been put together for you by someone else. When it comes down to installing pro software, you can think of it as building a custom-built PC. You need to go to different vendors, order different parts, and then put them together. And it's a lot easier than it may sound. Let me give you a high-level picture of the most common setup. First, I'm going to include the operating system for completeness. Next, you typically have to install the editor. Now, you use a text editor to write some text, you use a spreadsheet editor to deal with spreadsheets, and I'm currently using the slide editor for this presentation. By that rationale, you need a code editor to write some code. And back in the day, people did write code in Notepad, and I'm glad those days are over. While consumer-oriented software is going to work with one thing and one thing only, the professional code editors can work with multiple things, referred to as multiple languages. So the approach today is to have an editor on its own, and then to have a plugin for a specific language. Now sometimes, and I emphasize this point, sometimes, you need another piece of software that will interact and act as an intermediary between the editor and the operating system. In the case of web programming, this is where the web browser and some other software fits in. In the case of Java, this is where the Java virtual machine and other software goes. In some languages, like C, after the program has been compiled, can directly interact with the operating system. Now that we have the foundation in place, let's see how this is implemented in Java. First, for our setup to work, we certainly need an operating system to be in place. Next, we need Java and the editor. In our case, it's called Eclipse. Now, we need Java because the original intent behind the technology was write your code once, and then it's going to be able to execute on any computer and any OS. Java solves this task by having a Java virtual machine being installed on the computer or a device. And then it's the Java virtual machine that is going to interact with the operating system, taking care of the details. So this is what we are going to install first. Next, we are going to pick up the Java Developer Kit. This is how people who wrote Java decided to do things. If somebody wants to run a compiled Java code on their machine, they only need Java Virtual Machine. If somebody wants to go beyond and code Java, then they're going to install Java Developer Kit as well. And this is what we are going to do next. Also, as mentioned previously, the editor is usually broken down into the editor itself and the plugin. When it comes down to Eclipse and Java, the Eclipse people are so nice. They offer this package as one nice big thing. So this is what we are going to do. We are going to install the editor and the plugin as one thing. Next, I'm going to install Java Developer Kit. We're moving away from consumer-oriented software and moving towards the pro-oriented one. So it's time to adjust accordingly. I'm going to search for JDK download. Once on the website, I'm going to look for JDK version 8, which is more than enough for our purposes. Now I'm going to find the operating system. Make sure that you select 64-bit if you have a 64-bit system. The reason is the installer of Java Virtual Machine from the previous step had auto-detected your system, and it had installed a 64-bit version if you have one. So I'm going to select 64-bit. An alert box is displayed. Must accept license agreement. It's a little hard to find, so I'm going to show you where it is. Here you go. I check off the radio button. And I'm good to go. When the download is finished, I'm going to install the software using default settings. Next, I'm going to download the editor, aka IDE, or Integrated Developer Environment. In this case, it's Eclipse Java Photon. It's a particular version of Eclipse designed to work with Java. I'm using Java Photon in the course, so hence I'm going to specifically look for that version. And then I'm going to download, and it's pretty straightforward how to do this. I'm also going to ignore the warning, this is not the latest version. It works, and it's good enough. I'm going to install the program using defaults and launch it when the installation is complete. Now I'm going to select Eclipse IDE for Java developers. Pay attention to this choice, because if someone messes this up, their screen is not going to look like mine. Eclipse's user interface is extremely dynamic. The program adds menu choices, moves windows around depending on this particular choice. So, Eclipse IDE for Java developers. Select directory. Accept license agreement when needed. Use default and launch. I'm going to make sure that welcome screen is not displayed at startup and close it. Now what I'm going to do is to create your first Java project. Eclipse is going to break this down into two steps. First, it's going to create a directory, which it calls project. Then it's going to create a file where your code is going to go. Java calls this file a class. For starters, thinking of a class as simply a text file with some code is going to do just fine. Later on, this understanding will be evolutionized. I know it's not a word. Okay, first I'm going to quickly run through the process without commentary, just to give you a big picture of how things work. Stop right now and just watch what happens. Now I'm going to go through the steps with explanation. My goal is to create a Java project with a class in it and test the setup using Hello World program. The program simply prints Hello World string to console. I'm going to click on New Class button. Open New Project Wizard. Yes. And there I'm going to look for Java, Java Project, and click Next. I'm going to name project max value, which is the project that we're doing, and use defaults. Then click Finish. New class window appears, and now I'm going to create a class. I'm going to call it the same way, max value, and I'm going to leave this guy unchecked. And check out public static blah 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 yada yada yada. Your screen should look like this. Note, I'm going to ignore the warning message. For our quick and dirty setup check, this is good enough. Now I'm going to click Finish. Eclipse had created a project, file, and some code in our class. I want to explain what those lines of code mean. We'll save that for the appropriate time during the course. Now, if the code in your window does not look like mine, then pause the video and type it in exactly the way you see it on my screen. To test my setup, I'm going to paste in one line of code, like so. All it does, it prints Hello World to console. It's kind of like sending a text message. It says, computer, send a text message, Hello World. And I'm going to click Run. Always save resources before launching and click OK. And there we go. We have Hello World printed to console. I'm sure that in the 70s, when this pattern was established, this had a huge wow effect. Wow! We were able to display something on our small black screen with a blinking cursor. Now I'm going to speed things up, so that when you file this in your memory, you have a nice quick reference. I'm going to run the movie from the start without explanation, at a quick pace. If you follow the Programming 101 using Java course, you'll notice that my window is slightly different. My goal here is to redecorate the layout, the workspace, the perspective. I'm also going to explain the two buttons on Control Panel that I'm going to be using and give you an amazing pro tip for installing pro software later on. Here we go. First, I'm going to duplicate this line of code many times to demonstrate the point in a second. I'm going to go here near line 7 and right-click. Then select the toggle breakpoint. What does this do? Well, by default, the computer executes one line of code at a time. It may do many actions within that one line of code, but by default, it executes one line of code at a time. So what this toggle breakpoint business does, it says you're executing the code one line at a time. When you reach this line, stop and wait for me. To make sure that Eclipse respects the breakpoint, I need to click on Debug button. Debugging is a process of removing bugs from the program. More about it later. So I click Debug, and I see this window, Switch Perspective. So I'm going to go ahead and switch. And now the user interface looks exactly the way it does in the course. I'm just going to move some things around. Okay, now I will traverse the program to demonstrate this one line of code at a time notion. I'm going to repeatedly press F6 to advance execution of the program to the next line. Let me do this one more time. Click Debug and go F6. And just like that, we're done. Although Eclipse interface had been designed in the old era, dominated by the so many buttons, so little space principle, it can be quite intimidating at the beginning. We're only going to be using two buttons, Run and Debug. Run to run the program start to finish. Debug to interrupt the execution of the program at the breakpoint. And I'm only going to be using F6 shortcut. What about the promised pro tip? Ah, yes. Now, over the course of recording this video, I ended up reinstalling the entire system 5 times. Yeah, because I kept finding variations. Now, I wanted to weed out all the discrepancies so that you guys have a good experience. Now, here's a tip. When you're dealing with installations like these, do not expect to go from start to finish, following each step exactly, and getting the same exact results as in the tutorial. A more realistic scenario is that 80% of the time, all the steps are going to work exactly as described. And then, when you encounter the rest 20, stop, take a deep breath. It's just the same stuff, different day business. What you want to do is turn your brain and identify what is this step trying to accomplish. Figure out how to accomplish the same goal, and there's probably a number of ways you can go about doing this. Once you're done with that milestone, that particular step, you can decide what to do next. Continue with the original tutorial or do something else. Software changes, UI change, people may miss a step or think it wasn't significant enough. So just stop, figure out what to do next, and move forward.